Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. There's Louis' chair. Look, Louis is missing out on a primo opportunity for advertising on that chair. There we are. Ian straight in with the chair. What's Richard got? No, it's not Richard. What's Mark got in the background there? I don't know. Well, hello, dear viewer. I've upset delivery people with my assertions about Amazon. And some people may not have picked up. If you're a regular viewer, and you look at SGS News, you know I put some out there headlines and suggestions in there sometimes. And this one worked. It really worked. I'm very sorry to see DHL have left, to a certain degree, have left the scene, because I do think they had the best trials. And they really did do some great stuff, and they must have thought about things very hard, and they've decided not to be in the delivery business. Amazon... Go on.
Does that mean that my tracking code for a package that I'm waiting won't get delivered?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it means. Yeah. No, of course not. They're still going to be doing their thing, and in fact, they've previewed rolling robots and things like that, and all sorts of other things. And they're going into big electric aircraft, which makes sense. The Cessna Caravan is going to be up there before a lot of the other things for DHL. FedEx are desperate.
Aerial business to consumer drone delivery is, we know it's not going to be a thing, is it?
No, not unless, well, and that's a pity for Richard. We're very pleased to have Richard along, because he comes along and takes abuse from us. Richard from Altitude Angel, who is... Firstly, we must congratulate him. New father, well, not such a new father anymore. And so you have now learned the ability to not require sleep, Richard.
Yeah. That's all I can say, because I'm too tired. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So you must be really, really scuppered now. Your whole business model's fallen apart as the owner of the leading UTM. What are you going to do? The sky's not going to be full of delivery drones. How are you possibly ever going to have a future now?
Well, I think the interesting thing about that statement is it's never really a future that we thought was coming anytime soon anyway. Deliveries from a depot to your house via a drone are very interesting at getting headlines, but logistically speaking, the technology is probably not the limiting factor in making that happen, but there are many more mundane things that will, such as councils and noise abatement rules and the lack of town and city planning for landing facilities, et cetera, et cetera. So, our initial focus is on inter-airport and inter-depot delivery, which is going to be a very significant area of our business in the next couple of years.
That's very interesting. You're bucking the trend there. Did you think that early on? Were you not bedazzled by the others early doors?
No, I think probably our first ever business plan was one of the estimations that we made was that although there will be lots of very cool marketing, and there'll probably be tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in that area, except for very known trial areas or limited trials, you're not really going to see that at any scale in the short to mid term, which I think is where we're recognizing in the headlines, this week and last week. What's interesting for us, as I say, is the kind of commercial use or industrial use of drones to move large amounts of cargo between depots and airports. I think that's certainly an area where the risk can be better managed. The environment is controllable from a physical perimeter perspective, and the risk profile is just so different. I would certainly say this has very much been part of our roadmap, but ultimately it benefits us either way. What we do is flight and navigation. We're not particularly aligned to any one vertical in this space, whether it's inspection or deliverers.
What does it say for the world when a bunch of balding, middle-aged, bearded men can see the future while investors, politicians, and regulators have no clue?
Well, apart from Richard, it's our combined 1 million years or whatever it is, because Richard's he doesn't contribute in age. He's a mere slip of a lamp.
I've aged a lot since my daughter was born. It's been a long 3 months.
Congratulations, Richard. It only gets better on the second one. You'll get better on the second one. Start handling already that topic. Get over with it.
I'll have to plan that in. I don't have time anymore.
I think it's interesting, isn't it, the whole Amazon thing, and a lot of this is money to burn for the sake of it. But you also sort of look at some other things and think, well, not all of it is pipe dreams. You know, if we look at Richard Branson, if we look at Amazon now with their spacecraft thing, if we'd have gone back far enough, we could have sat here and said that was pipe dreams, that was never going to happen. Yet now they've both delivered it. SpaceX, in some ways, you could argue
Come on,
the same.
SpaceX is like 1 bajillion times ahead of the other two. We can launch. I said, hang on. I'm going to put you down a bit now. I said to them, because just today we were talking SpaceX, and I was telling the children how exciting it was, and new things coming, and all that sort of thing, and reminding them that we've launched weather balloons to similar heights to Mr. Branson and Mr. Bezos from our primary school. So it's not particularly, it's like, okay, that's just the application of money. That's just the application of money.
Not everything is pipe dreams. If you live anywhere near rich, if you head down Milton Keynes, you've got robots going around the pavement delivering shopping. So a lot of this stuff, I think we all
in Reading. They'd be stolen in Reading. They'd be gone.
It's amazing it survived in Milton Keynes, if I'm honest.
To be fair, I think it's based on quantity.
Don't they get confused at the roundabouts?
No, it just says, please don't hurt me all of the time. So I think it's okay. But so I think the problem is with this, we always said, what's cheaper than a man in a van? And the problem with drone delivery was nothing for my $2.99 lightning cable Amazon Basics that I need for my iPhone, because my kids have once again managed to destroy another one in short order, isn't really worth delivering by drone. But it still, I think, has probably given them an awful lot of valuable data, and I suspect that data won't go to waste.
Replace the word data with publicity and marketing.
So they're going to take a bucket load of R&D money from governments, because it's new tech and governments want to dish out money for that kind of stuff. So they're going to have been paid some money somewhere. But it is, as you said, it was cheaper than a man in a van. So there's your price point, and it's about £3 with a man on a van. If it's delivery route or whatever, and it's a man on a push bike, it's about £2 a delivery. But to make that man in a van cheaper, all he's got to do is get an electric van. Now, he's still got to have a vehicle regardless, but all of a sudden the fuel cost has come down. The cost of the man in the van is just about to do another drop. These deliveries were going to cost, £12 a time plus? It's not worth it, like you say, for the delivery time.
But there is something that could change all of this, and it's happening in the UK, and it is the electrification of the road network, which we're having with the car industry. I'm seeing it now where like in the UK, we've gone from electric cars in general business use being a pipe dream to literally every major business now looking at electric vans, because they have to. And every business is looking at the next 5 years going almost full electric. British Gas, all of them.
Why?
Because it's law. We have to. It's been
it's not for a mere advantage of the technology. It's just because you're being taxed like hell for dinosaur food.
It's actually cheaper. If you were to get down to the economics of it all, at the end of the day, all business is about money. And if you want to save money today, if you turn around and said to Richard, okay, Richard, if you could halve your fleet's running cost straight away, all your business vehicles, all your company cars, and you can halve that cost overnight, and all you've got to do is have an electric fleet, would you take that deal, Richard? Yes or no?
How much is the fleet going to cost me to buy?
You're going to buy it first. Half the bicycle don't work.
Yeah, but total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership is the business bottom line.
I think I get where Mark is going. I mean, it's a really attractive opportunity, right? But there are other costs. Like you've got to have tons of charge points installed, and you've got to make sure you get green energy, because the other energy is really bad for your company. So there's it's not straightforward, right? But it will become that way, hopefully.
You see, it kind of in my head it is, because clean energy or not doesn't matter. You're taking power from the grid. The grid is never going to be pure green, no matter what. There's always going to be nuclear power stations in the UK, regardless. So they're always going to be background.
Hooray for nuclear.
Is that green?
Yeah.
I don't know. It depends which bulletin you read. That could be green.
It's part of the green card. You argue on that, isn't it? You know, how green is nuclear? You know?
Well, I read in the Daily Mail the nuclear stations are winding down. They won't have enough power. And the Daily Mail wouldn't lie.
They can't work.
And we're going to get small. Allegedly, just around the corner, I think it's Burton Power Station is going to become a small nuclear station for us. Allegedly, it's only the waste that's the problem, and then dismantling the station for the next 100 years is just a problem. So
then we get SpaceX that ships the wasted fuel to the sun. Come on, they ship a car to the sun. Why cannot ship wasted fuel?
Don't trust Louis to navigate in space. It went to Mars, Louis. It's the other way.
We've got, and there is a problem coming. We now already have the shortage of lithium happening. That's already a massive problem. Now,
there's no lithium shortage.
I've got a story.
There is about to be they're already talking due to the UK specifically that we're gonna help push it into a lithium shortage because of the British government have put this. When is it? I think is it 20?
Well, that's the old fossil fuel industry saying,
it's happening when this happens, right? If you go anywhere around the country, you're having electric stations being put in everywhere by all of the major oil providers. Shell Energy, BP Energy, they're all putting full stations in because they know this is coming. So drone delivery may get a second bite of the cherry here because what
sort of drone? Let's try and swing the conversation back into our world. So, is that uncrewed, unpersoned, unmanned, whatever the trendy vehicle? Is it wheeled, and does that need to be then part of some sort of traffic management system that needs to not only look after that big drone that's coming with the big load, and then stuff's going to be put in the van. And all those electric cars are they going to be autonomous? I mean, there's going to be an awful lot of vehicles that might need what would we call it, a unified traffic management system or something.
I think it's going to be a mix of systems. You're going to end up with point to point, so warehouse to a shop or Amazon locker area. And that'll be one major piece. And if that'll be something that flies or something that drives, will be interesting because right now we've got to think 10 years ahead because we now know Amazon and DHL, we're going to give them a second bite. So let's say it's 10 years time. Let's say they come back for their cherry bite in 10 years time, where they're going to deliver. Now, in those 10 years, will we get more autonomous ground vehicles? Could a van actually take stock from a warehouse to to a shop, for example? So it's going to carry half a ton or a ton of stuff to a shop by itself. There's something that's going to fly. So the second bite has really, really got to be home delivery. But not only has it got to be home delivery, it's got to be really cheap. This is where they've got, because if they can't make it cheap, it's going to be a problem for them.
And that's why I'm electrifying my trebuchet.
Exactly. It's never going to be cheap. But all right, here's another question then. In 10 years' time, will we have sorted out aerial deliveries just between hospitals? Because and places where emergency use cases are needed, defibrillators somewhere, helping the police.
I'd like to think there's a possibility where that could happen. I think the reality is the NHS in this country and similar in other countries are going to have other priorities and other monetary constraints in the next 10 years that will mean it won't be ubiquitous, right? But it could be. And I think
do you think the regulator, though, Richard, can catch up in those 10 years? Do you think the regulator, because that's the biggest hurdle for everything, really, right now. If we're to be honest, the technology to deliver something is dead easy. We all know if you actually wanted to, you can deliver something from point A to point B. It's not rocket science. Okay, it's very easy to do. So do you think, Richard, it could be the regulators that are given a bit of a stall block? Do they need to do something to hurry it up a bit? Or have we got to wait for all this big airspace changes that we're going to get?
An awful lot is possible today, but I mean, I'm the head of a technology company, right? And I have to push back and say, making a drone fly from point A to point B automatically is very, very simple. Helping it to do that safely, very, very difficult, right?
No.
That's where No, it is.
What do you mean by safety?
I can tell you 100% doing that at scale in an urban, busy environment, or any aircraft in any location in mixed mode airspace, very, very difficult to assure that safely. So that's why I think the regulators struggle, because, you know, we got all these annoying, pushy technical people like us telling them that it's just about, you know, this new sensor that needs to go on the drone and everyone's going to be happy. And the reality is that's not the case. So I think it's a little bit of both. If I'm absolutely honest, regulators need to look more at the technology that is available and the demonstrations and the trials that are taking place and learn from those and do that quickly. And secondly, I think technology companies need to stop being their own worst enemies personally and stop pushing the fact that everything is doable now, because the reality is technology is a small piece of the problem. Our airspace is still globally managed by more people than machines. So there's your biggest limiting factor straight away.
So, Richard, do you think that this is going to be an integration problem, or I'm a great believer in segregation rather than integration? If we're going to have this higher risk transport, which is like the unmanned cargo planes, would it make more sense to have
higher risk, by the way, Bruce?
Because there's no one there to pet the dog in the cockpit.
I'd feel a lot safer if there were no dogs in the cockpit. I'm just saying.
At the moment, I think it's perceived as high risk because we know the limitations of technology at times. And that's why the A300s, A320s and whatever, they still have a pilot in the cockpit. Even though in theory they could be completely automated, we still have a man there sitting at the controls just in case something goes wrong. So would it make sense to have these in a separate traffic corridor operating in low population areas and even separate facilities, airports they can fly to and from, so they're not going to interfere or potentially jeopardize manned aviation, and that would give a little more perhaps ability to move forward more quickly because we're not having to deal with the integration issues, these sense and avoid, all that sort of stuff.
Well, I think that is also part of the problem, right? Because you've got all of these upstart drone companies, including ourselves in that, asking to do these crazy things. And the only tools that regulators typically have on an international basis to deal with them is to segregate the airspace. And that in turn creates pressure on GA communities, HEM services, police air services. They all get quite uppity, and quite rightly, when you've got, N companies popping up, just taking chunks of the sky offline so that they can bimble around with drones. So I actually think the solution from that perspective is integration. And actually from a resource perspective, we only have the one sky, right? So even if you start to separate things vertically, the old adage, right? If it goes up, it's going to come down. And Murphy's Law is going to dictate to you that it isn't always going to come down in a controlled fashion in the area you want. So I don't think that segregation makes a lot of sense on a national perspective, but realistically, segregation is a very sensible tool that, in specific areas could be used, for instance, to set up controlled corridors, or could be used to set up testing zones, at a grander scale than they are today. But again, we've got to work with the regulators to make certain that the extents of those boundaries, that those temporary danger areas, etc., aren't too big and too burdensome, and they still have to be penetrable by manned aircraft. And again, that's an issue that's got to be resolved.
I'm not surprised that the operator of a UTM is in favour of integration, I have to say.
Well, I mean, segregation could work, right? And I think there's a place for it. For instance, if you want to set up delivery, perhaps in a very urban environment between a couple of hospitals and a pathology lab, that could make sense, right? But again, over a busy urban area, segregation in the airspace pushes other people out, and that could create a big challenge. So I think integration is sensible. I mean, we all walk in the same direction on the pavement, right? Even though we're all going in different places, we all cross paths, we all manage to self-separate. We're all automated, highly autonomous individuals, or I should say, not automated. That's a different podcast. That one. But more specifically, I think it's important to get to one sky that can be shared by all kinds of traffic, right? And we have that today with manned aviation. We have military air traffic coexisting with civilian air traffic, commercial air traffic, etc. General aviation. We've got to figure out how we put more things into the sky.
So urban, for example, urban flying, we know we're capped at 400 feet. We know manned aviation is going to be at 1,000 feet. There is 600 feet there that can be quite happily segregated away.
But it doesn't
only ambulances. The worst thing is the air ambulance that's going to come in.
Air ambulance, police service, you have survey craft with special missions. The sky is actually really quite busy from a GA and commercial aviation perspective in some instances below that 600 feet, below 1,000 feet. And you have to bear in mind, I think, that vertical separation, things especially in an urban environment get quite congested, particularly when you have a big urban cityscape. So you just got to think about it.
But surely our air traffic vertical separations are based on really old technology. Everything should be a modern, fancy new airplane with fancy autopilots and fancy stuff and fancy instruments, and we should be able to reduce the separations and free up the airspace a little bit, both vertical and horizontal.
So most separation is a factor of time, right? And the reason it's predominantly, or I'd say the predominant reason it's a factor of time, is because you have to factor in latency for a human being to make a decision and get on a radio, and the speed of the aircraft, right? So just good process tells you that if all of that's a problem, you probably want to time how long it takes and then a safe buffer, and everything is good. And in the worst case, you've then separated on different headings and different altitudes. Now that's a really human-based system, right? That works well. We're going to have a conversation, but it doesn't work if we throw even 100 aircraft in a very small area with no humans to speak to. So things happen more quickly. They happen in closer proximity. Things can ripple with more unintended consequences if you don't have really tight control, or at least a control mechanism where you can pass instructions back and forth very quickly. And I mean, this is an area we've done heaps, probably 6 years worth of research into now, simulation testing, etc.
Well, that was going to be my next question. What causes the biggest ripples in your simulations then?
The biggest ripples, a TDA going up or a NOTAM unexpectedly because it's an area which is fine and then immediately not fine for no apparent reason. If it's an unscheduled NOTAM, then they can be incredibly disruptive, because then you have a whole bunch of aircraft in an area that suddenly can't be there, and one or two of them or a handful of them may have been going there to complete an operation. So it's not always a simple case of saying, just turn around and go back from whence you came. You might not be able to by that point, because you're 80% through your journey. So there are lots of considerations, but equally you also have to factor in different sensor capabilities. This is why I was picking on Mark's point earlier. Different aircraft have different sensor capabilities, and the typical thing that lots of aircraft or lots of, let's just say, vehicle manufacturers do is they react by moving in the opposite direction when a sensor goes off. So if you have 4 simple sensors on an aircraft, north, east, south, and west, and you are heading towards something towards the north, and there's an obstacle, you stop and you go south. And that works well if you're the only aircraft, but if there's another one behind you, or if instead of behind you there's a wall or something else, you now have lots of unintended path alterations to deal with. And again, chuck in a bridge so that you don't have vertical separation because you've all gone under it, and you get really interesting scenarios to deal with. And actually the UTM is more valid in those scenarios than in many others.
So here's a question then. So should there not be one solution, simple solution for all of this? And in my head, it should just be everything in the sky has a transponder. Doesn't matter what it is, as if it's human made, or so if it's a drone, a paramotor, a microlight, a Cessna, a Airbus, don't matter what the hell it is, it should all just have a transponder. And if it's got a transponder, it'll transmit its direction, its heading, and its height, because that, and its speed if you want, because that's all we need to know. Because if we can see everyone in the sky, it will become like manned aviation, where we're all responsible for our flight to avoid other people. You could have a UTM that deals with automated systems, but that's just flight management systems then take over and deal with their particular aircraft. So Amazon Prime would have their own flight management system, and it deals, and it'll see these other transponders in the sky, and it goes, oh, I'll go around them, or they're heading in that direction, I'm just going to go this way instead. So are we over engineering? because this is one thing that, are we overcomplicating the UTMs? Are we overcomplicating how to see things? It's all about see and avoid, detect and avoid. But if we went down to the very basic thing, we have to know where everything is in the sky. So just a transponder on everything means that Bruce, he could then go out flying. He would then be able to see everything else that's out there, because he'll have a little transponder on his drone. He'll see everyone else's drone, and he'll be able to fly from A to B to C to D. He'll be able to go out, enjoy it, and he can see everything. Would not be the most easiest thing to actually put into place, instead of spending a fortune on hardware to sense a drone, or a fortune on sorry to pick on your
towers.
But you've got your towers, which are great, and they've got all these sensors on them and everything. But are they needed if we went just for one transponder, just for that one solution? Could we not eliminate so much cost?
No, you couldn't. One of the things that I want to raise is we have this, in your scenario there, Mark, it all works fine until it doesn't. Now, let's say suddenly there's a terror alert, so they start dithering the GPS signal. So none of these craft really know where they are at all.
Well,
and you don't know where they are either. So without some other method of sense and avoid, you have a giant mess in the air and things start banging into each other.
Well, no, not necessarily, because if you take certain flight controllers, they will do due reckoning straight away. And if you kept everything on, the problem is, if you did build systems,
let's get shares in that one autopilot system and one thing that everybody's
That's fantastic, because nobody will ever change course partway through a flight.
Yes, and there is that risk. So there will always be that risk, but that risk is so small. In the UK, I can't remember the last time they scrambled the whole of the GPS for the UK, because it just was chaos.
We've had GPS systems fail. That ground station in Italy failed, or whatever it was. So, but the thing is, you're saying you're confusing risk with probability. The probability is very small, but the risk is very high because the consequences are enormous.
Well,
so I need to jump in here, because Mark, I mean, you had like a 5-minute session there without breathing, and I think there's a simple answer to your question. Is it simple? And the answer is no, because you're talking about a purely hypothetical environment, and we just don't live in one. If everyone had a transponder, or if everyone had a device that could just do dead reckoning, if the GPS was jammed, if this, if that, all of that is great until it's not. When cost is a factor. Let's just take Amazon as an example. All the money in the universe could equip their aircraft with all of the best sensors. And let's take Bob's drone delivery startup. Probably can't do that. And then we can't guarantee now that everyone is playing by the same rule book. So, that's why I think manned aviation is given a very special place in regulation, because ultimately you have skin in the game, right? You're aboard and you don't want to die. But we've seen instances actually where that is the opposite, right? And bad things do happen. So, ultimately, coming back to your point, I partially agree with you. Visibility would solve a lot of problems, but visibility isn't orchestration, right? And that's the main challenge. Each member of an orchestra can see every other member of an orchestra, but they still look to a conductor for important timing signals and cues. And that is effectively, principally what a UTM is designed to do. It is to facilitate communication between lots of different entities and help them not hit each other. It doesn't mean that it overrides what capability is on a particular aircraft. In fact, one of the things it can do is level a playing field so that not all aircraft have to have the same level of equipage. And let's be honest, not all aircraft can have, because some of them have a payload capacity of 100 kilos. Some of them have a payload capacity of 2 kilos. So coming back full circle to you, do we need towers? The answer is, in the fullness of time, hopefully not. But you have to remember, in almost every country around the world, we have tens of thousands of towers already delivering our mobile phone service, right? And actually, those are well placed to help create these kind of skyways. And if you equip them appropriately, can act as a off-board detect and avoid solution, so that you can relay that to the lowest common multiple, to Bob's drone delivery startup, just as you could to Amazon. Right? So it's about that level playing field that deals with very different levels of equipment, very different levels of equipage, capacity, capability, visibility. And in that way, you build scale. Because I have to end now on this point. Yes, Bruce is a very, very good pilot. I have no doubt in my mind. However, put Bruce in an environment where he's operating with maybe 1,000 other aircraft in a square kilometer, and he's compressed to a narrow band of vertical airspace, maybe 100 feet high. He's going to have a hard time managing and traversing that safely, particularly because he has no idea where anyone else is going. So a transponder isn't going to be able to tell you all of that stuff. And even if it could, who would trust it? All of the transponder systems that are available today, mostly for civilian and commercial aviation, are unencrypted. I don't trust them. We trust them in the sense that they're a network, and traditionally have been inaccessible to other people. But now they're not, right? Any person with a USB TV stick there we go, or a hack RF or whatever it is, can pretend to be something else, or even just listen to it.
Yeah.
So there are a whole area of concern there that I think it is really easy to pick a single part of the problem and just say, wouldn't it be better if? But actually, the reality is, it's like ships in a harbor, right? You can't selectively choose one and raise it above the waterline. You have to let the water in and raise them all, or drop them all. So it's the same thing here. You've got to put a system which can deal with all of this change, can deal with all of these different capabilities, so that you can build to scale. But that doesn't mean you can only build to scale once you've got the scale, right? So you don't have to turn on a national UTM with total ubiquitous vision. Go back to those initial corridors that we spoke about. I think that's how you slowly build out a national capability. I'll pause now. I'm almost off my.
I think Ian's gone to sleep. You've put him to sleep. Look.
He's burning something. He's making sure it's that fire.
I'm quite intrigued. There's going to be so many aircraft in that square kilometre. That's the first thing. The airspace is massive. I'm surprised there's going to be so many.
Well, you can't go down the route of our forefathers, right? Who decided that 4 billion would be enough. Who would ever want more, right? Or actually the total code space for ADSB. Who would ever need more? I mean, the reality is, whatever you think, we need more than we think. And actually, in aviation, we don't upgrade systems every 2 years because it's fun. You put something in and it's there for 20. So if we're going to do this, we're going to lay new tarmac. You don't lay it down hoping that it expires in a year's time.
So
this stuff's going to be here, and it's going to affect probably my daughter, right, when she grows up and wonders why the sky is closed because someone's pushed for segregation rather than integration. Reality check here. These things are gonna survive all of us on the call, and we've got to put in the right kind of systems that can scale appropriately.
Yeah, Christopher, that's exactly why we get Richard on here to beat him about this, because he is evil. He is evil. It's true.
I get that he's not a fan of the corridor talk, but monetization. I'm sorry, we just have to talk about this for a minute. Monetization is how the airspace works today, right? That's the first principle that everyone forgets. It sounds like a dirty word, but it really doesn't matter. There is no such thing as the ability to fly for free. You either have to buy an aircraft, you have to store it somewhere. You don't have to buy aircraft. You can just steal them, can you, Mark? You can store them anywhere you like for free. You don't have to worry about fuel and infrastructure. But the reality is, if you're a commercial aircraft and you're traveling on commercial business, you are paying for that flight. And the whole point around corridors is to limit risk. And anyone that disagrees that corridors are a great way to limit risk, look at the way all airspace is designed internationally for commercial travel today. It's all organized in corridors. And we do that because we can regulate for the risk in those areas. That's why you don't have to
give air traffickers jobs. Because
maybe that's the reason. Maybe I've got it wrong.
Put them all in one place. And that means air traffickers have got to be there.
It's inefficient, but it's how risk is managed.
All I'm going to say is Class G airspace.
Yeah, what about Class G airspace?
What about it?
You have it, yes. You also have fields, and you don't pay to walk in those. But the point is, public space is maintained. You have the ability to have Class G airspace because someone else has segregated other parts of it and are keeping their aircraft there. Class G airspace, you're bimbling around in Class G. You can't just transit through a CTR without asking, right? You have to rock up and give them some notice.
Segregation, segregation.
You see,
segregation is the way that it's handled today, right? And I think that's the point. We talk about corridors, but the reality is corridors are a tool, and those tools are used today extensively in commercial aviation. And the people who operate those corridors are able to transit through those corridors, and the people who want to transit those rely on the people who manage those corridors to allow them to transit that safely. That is a partnership, and that has always been the case.
It's a great idea. Crowd everybody into a narrow little space, and that's very safe.
I agree. Manned aviation, it's very managed. However, commercial drone, which is what I use, I'm not manned aviation at all. I'm commercial drone. I can fly in Class D airspace, which is highly regulated, for free right now. My only fear is at some point.
Highly regulated.
Well, you can fly there for free, but you can't fly there without permission, right?
I can fly in Class D without permission, thank you.
BLOS, yeah.
No, I'm talking commercial drone operation. I can go and fly.
Yeah, but you're talking about you flying one drone. We're talking about a super highway or a corridor of drones that allow us to scale to billions of flights, right? It's very different. You have privileges that are different because you can eyeball your drone, right? And we can't do that over a 400-mile space, right? If we want to go from one end of the country to the other. So, imagining that as the future, we can't solve that for that problem with today's mentality. What you can do as a person is very different. And that's the problem. That's why we don't have millions of drones, right? Because we can't replicate what you can do as a person in technology. That's the reality.
What concerns us is that as Class G airspace users who don't have to get specific permissions, the introduction of UTMs may try and bring us into the managed traffic flow situation where we have to pay for the use of something that previously we didn't have to pay for, because that will spread and that becomes a way of subsidizing some of the other operations.
Bruce, I couldn't agree more. I refer you back to Mark's wish: give all aircraft transponders. Well, who's going to pay for those? Have you spoken to GA pilots? Not all of them want to pay for that, right?
They rejected it. They rejected the CA approach.
This is why I say the solution is not to force other airspace users to change what those airspace users do. The solution is to integrate and work with each other. So, because we have a fleet of drones that wants to be automated and managed centrally, doesn't mean everything needs to be automated and managed centrally, but it would certainly make life a lot easier, including, by the way, for manned aircraft, if everybody could rely on a source of visibility, right? It's just sense. It's just common sense. The more we can see, the safer we all are. Now, the reality is, to make that happen, we either light up the sky actively so that you don't have to carry something around, or we ask you to put something on your aircraft. One of them costs more than the other. Which one do you think it is? And that's the reality.
Well, actually, according to all the regulators around the world, the drone operators are going to have to light their craft up, and it doesn't cost the regulator a thing because the drone operator pays the cost. So that's the cheapest way to do it, isn't it?
Well, I agree. There's some disparity there, right? Because I've often held that actually for someone who wants to bimble around, I say bimble a lot, but I use it to illustrate a point. You want to fly something that weighs 2 or 3 kilos around very, very close to the ground in a big empty field, and you will be asked to conform to far more regulations than a person in a GA aircraft, right? And the risk profile and the probability of something going wrong is probably a lot higher than it is for someone bimbling around with that little drone again. So, that I think is strange, because as a new technology that is not well understood, drones collectively get put in one big bucket where we suddenly apply higher standards, or we ask more of those people than we do actually of other airspace users. And that, to me, is a little bit strange, because actually if we're saying, well, it's really important that we see you, but actually it's not important for you to see us, that seems a little strange. And actually the answer to that is, well, it is important for us to see you. However, if you can't do that safely, then you shouldn't fly. And that's not really a solution, right? If I don't want to be seen, I turn off my transponder, and it's not a solution then to say, well, no other drones can take flight because I don't want to be seen. That's just insane, right?
Yeah, it shows the lunacy of the regulations, because under all regulations in all countries, the operator of an unmanned craft must yield right of way to that of a manned craft. So we need to see them because we have the obligation to keep out of their way. They don't need to see us because it's our responsibility. Yet the conspicuity is reversed. In Class G airspace, the drones will have to have remote ID and network ID, remote ID, but a manned aircraft doesn't even need a radio in Class G airspace.
Remember, remote ID, unless Richard can tell us otherwise, I don't think remote ID will be. Well, he might choose to on his towers. Richard, of course, could, put remote ID receivers, and that could then be part of his data, his data coming in. But that's not actually.
But eventually it will be. If you look at America, this broadcast remote ID is only an interim step until they've got the technology to implement network remote ID, which is electronic conspicuity coordinated through a UTM.
But are they going to bring that? Are they going to bring that into air traffic navigation services, or is that only for
pretty much? It looks like that based on the NPRM, original NPRM, it looked very much like that was the case, because you were not allowed to take off until a UTM had cleared your flight.
Remote ID, by the way, still doesn't solve and this is the problem that no one really talks about. Remote ID really doesn't solve the problem of trust and authenticity. It requires a UTM to expose certain endpoints to other UTMs over a public interface that anyone can authenticate with. And again, now we have a problem, because and this is why we will experiment with it, but until we have completed the work we're doing on the authentication side of things, then we're definitely not going to scale it, because we can't trust the information coming in, and equally we have an obligation to protect other people's personal information. We're not going to stick a public endpoint on the internet for anyone to figure out where everyone is flying. It's just ridiculous.
But I thought that was part of the business plan. Oh no, that's our business plan. Oh,
so hang on a minute, right? People want to create a remote ID when you might as well just create the transponder. Why are we creating something twice?
Well, I don't think we are. I think remote ID is a form of transponding. Right?
Yeah, it is, but it has to be one, or you know what I mean? Because they do talk. If you do read, they do say remote ID, and then they go, a transponder as well at some point in the future for certain things. It's like
but you've then got the capabilities of something vastly superior, which in this instance, let's just take remote ID as an option. And there are many sort of remote ID standards being promoted, but compare any of them to something like ADSB, right? And now what you're saying is, because we want to interface these, we have to seriously cripple remote ID so that it can be backwards compatible with something like ADSB, which was never really intended for the kind of scale it's dealing with today. So again, we have a problem, right? And as I say, in big systems of scale, enterprises, businesses always deal with different systems that they have various levels of trust with, and they can deal with that, right? And this is not a regulatory problem, it's a commercial problem. But the reality is you've got regulators stepping in to mandate certain activities that they don't understand the technical implications of. They think they do, but in some of the nuanced situations, they actually don't. So you then get people who are then trying to implement this technology faithfully, but simply are coming up against other problems. For example, in Europe, we have this wonderful thing called GDPR. Well, that just goes out of the window, doesn't it, with all of remote ID? So we can implement bits of remote ID, but then what's the point of having a standard, right? And that's the point. Today there are companies, and I use that term in the plural, that have fleets of aircraft, have systems which can track other drones, etc., and have their own identification mechanisms that are 100% authenticated, known to them, trusted. What remote ID has tried to do is kind of open up some sort of weird quasi broadcasts / network capability to collect all that, to solve Mark's visibility problem, which is one option to do that. But equally, it's trying to aggregate all of that information together so that all of these companies have a mechanism to communicate. But it doesn't deal with what is actually communicated and how interrogation happens across those walls, and who you let do that, right? And again, that's just a crazy situation to be in. And that's, we sue companies, right, that give out customer information or just leave it on the internet, but we're okay doing that with remote ID. That's totally fine. Giving every pilot an identifier and giving every giving every drone an identifier is a very old concept, right? That stems from putting a registration plate or a number plate or a license plate on your car and then licensing the driver. Well, we live in a modern era where it's possible to protect and preserve privacy, to promote security, and to randomize both of those the moment someone takes off. If anyone's got an Apple Pay or Google Pay, you guys use those, right? You pay with your credit card. Here's a fun fact. When you pay with that credit card, it's not giving anybody your actual credit card number. It's creating a brand new random number every single time for every single transaction. How's that work? The answer is technology, right? And, Apple have found a way and Google have found a way to protect and preserve privacy, yet interface it with one of the oldest transaction systems on the planet. the Visa payment network and the MasterCard and the Amex payment network. If they can do that, then we can do better with remote ID. We can do better with how we deal with identity information for manned aircraft as well as unmanned aircraft. And it doesn't have to be that hard. But you have people that don't really understand the technical side and the aviation side trying to come together and then arguing with each other really about things neither really understand. And that's why we're stuck with things like the ASTM remote ID standard at the moment.
Yeah, for me, that's why I've stepped away from that future flight thing. I was very, very disappointed when I'll put in their stuff, but I used to go to the webinars and things, but now it's just like, nah, you don't understand. It's because they've Wing came in and let's do ASTM F38. Off we go. Here we go. It's like, no.
When you see any company, I think, pushing a particular standard, I think it regardless of domain, you've got to ask why they're pushing that. And that kind of standard works really well when all you're asking people to do is to register that they have an interest in a particular large volume of airspace at a particular time. Now, when we've looked at this, we've just said, well, we're a UTM. We care about all the airspace all of the time. So we'll just register an interest in every single grid square on the planet. Well, that's a great system then, isn't it? But the reason that's been done is so that one company can't see the flights of another. And if you're operating a delivery network, you certainly, FedEx doesn't want DHL knowing where its parcel trucks are going, right? And how many customers it's got. But there are other solutions to that. It just so happened that one was pushed by a company that has very deep pockets and was speaking in the right forums at the right time. Is it the only solution? It's definitely not. And actually, there are other competing standards, quote unquote, as well. But the reality is they're all arguing about something which ultimately still isn't solving for the base problem, which is who do I trust? Each of you could have a UTM. Each of you could have implement a remote ID protocol. But how do I trust, or how do I verify that Mark's UTM, for example, is bona fide, that I should trust it, that he's done decent identity checks on his his members, etc. The reality is there are all these kind of problems as well. It'd be much better if we had an aviation authority anywhere in the world right now that had a registration database that you could actually interrogate. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Rather than a spreadsheet. That would be great.
Right? You're saying someone created a system at 2.3 million and you can't integrate that database? No,
I wish it was 2.3 million. I think it was a bit more, actually, Mark. If I recall, it was closer to 4.
You need a Raspberry Pi 4 instead of a Raspberry Pi 3 for that sort of carry on.
Yeah.
I was in at least a 4, I think, Bruce.
I was in the room, Richard, when they were telling us about it at the CAA. It was and because it was 2 people from the company, I had to ask them, how do you justify the money? You've never seen red faces before like that. It's like, come on, tell me why. And they're like, oh, well, it's government, and it's all the procurement and it's all this, and it's just BS when it could have been a server sat in that corner of this room. I
think the reality is, I think a lot of these problems are trying to be solved by people that mean very, very well, right? So we have lots of smart people thinking about future airspace regulations. We have lots of smart people thinking about cool airframes and next generation technologies. But again, everyone's coming at this from the point of view of their particular company. You have sensor manufacturers. Well, the future should just be vehicle to vehicle, right? Because, well, that's what they do, right? You've got UTMs where UTMs just need to see everything, right? Because actually we don't really care what you're doing. We just want to get you from A to B as safely as possible and as efficiently as possible. And then you've got delivery companies that are very opposed in some instances to that. But the reality is, I think this is a charged point. This will be fun. I think the majority of the world completely misunderstands what UTM is actually meant to be and what it is for and what it is and who it is for, because we constantly get, people, when we used to do trade shows before the world exploded during the pandemic, you'd always get a commercial pilot come up to you and say, well, UTMs, I'm never going to use you. And you say, good. Don't need you to use me. You can crack on, mate. If you'd like some awesome free safety data, we have a lot of that, and actually you probably do use us for that. But the reality is, UTM isn't there for everybody in the same way that airwave radio isn't there for everybody, right? It's there for people who need it, and that's, I think, a bigger problem today is that UTM is just thrown around. I think the last count we did a market survey, there are nearly 750 UTM companies now. And that just blows my mind, because I think 99% of the people, when they say that, is what they actually mean is they've got a solution for managing their fleet of drones or maybe they've got a solution for doing some permission in airspace that's probably not national. So there's a lot of misconceptions around this, even though, you know, U-Space and NASA have tried to come at this from different angles and codify it. People still completely mangle it for marketing and investment purposes.
The problem is, though, that we've got regulators who don't understand it, because if you look at the network ID NPRM, that was going to force UTM on everybody, because you couldn't take off until you got cleared by the UTM, which you were connected to through the network with your drone. And so they were going to basically say, well, UTM is for everybody. You have to use it, or you're going to be not in compliance with the regulations, or you're going to be using non-compliant equipment. So how do you deal with that?
Again, I think any UTM has to deal with things that are connected to it and things that are not connected to it. You can't keep your members safe, your users safe, if you can't see everything in the sky, right? So whether you force people to carry everything, which my personal view, I think is a terrible idea. You make everyone carry exactly the same piece of equipment and make sure it's all serviced, all working perfectly. And when we want to update it, make sure it's all updated at precisely the same time, so it always works forever. That's a terrible idea. Equally, make a whole bunch of people who don't have to pay to fly today start paying. That's a terrible idea, right? Especially if
so
you
don't
say,
see
well,
the USA as a big market for Altitude Angel.
What, making people who don't pay today pay now? No.
Well, I mean, the FAA is obviously dead set on making everyone use a UTM and having all the same equipment installed. So if you're not aligned with that, how are you going to get any business there?
Well, I don't know what the FAA is really thinking, but what I do know, for instance, is that it has Lance, and it taunts Lance everywhere all the time. The problem with Lance is, and it's still a very dirty thing, is that no company is allowed to monetize its interface to Lance. So, you know, you can't hold true that the FAA want everyone to use a UTM, because no commercial entity in the world is really going to do it in anything other than R&D, because they can't monetize it. You know, legally prohibited under the memorandum of understanding with the federal government to monetize your Lance implementation.
But the NPRM was different. That they specifically said there will be partners who will provide this service at a fee. So they've basically said, yeah, the door's open to monetization.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting one. But again, the wider question there is, why does everyone need to use it, right? You know, why? When you say everyone, I'm assuming you mean every drone pilot. And the reality is that's an option, right? I guess, you know, if you want to go down that route, and you're a rule maker and you've got the federal government's money, yeah, maybe you can go ahead and do that. But why? Why? We've always, you know, when people come to us and say, should all drones be visible all the time? The first thing we turn around and say is, why? You know, if you want to go fly your agricultural drone in a big empty field up in Wales somewhere, and you want to do it at 300 feet or whatever it's going to be, why do we care? You know, if you want to fly effectively an automated, no pilot in the loop flight, and you want to go and do an amazing cargo delivery carrying 200 kilos of cargo, you probably need something like a UTM, right? You aren't going to do that by eyeballing it in a field. So again, it's just choosing the right tool for the job. And corridors, for instance, to come back to the point that was made earlier, corridors actually make that a probability, rather than requiring everybody else to conform with the standard, which is going to cost them a whole heap of money. Corridors provide a mechanism of constraint where you can actually set very slightly different requirements for particular classifications of air traffic. If only it was as if we had an aviation system that dealt with volumes of airspace that are permeable to certain type of aircraft and not others based on equipage. But we have that already, right? That's enshrined in international aviation law. But you're quite right. Not all pilots are burdened by that system in the way as others. And it's usually commercial air transport that pays for the services that it receives and the privileges that it receives.
You asked the question why, and this is where we have the big sort of divide between those who know what they're doing and those who don't know what they're doing. If you ask the FAA why, they'll say, because we say so, because we've said to them, why do we need all these extra regulations? Where's the risk analysis? And they say, we're not interested. We're the FAA, you do what we say. And the question I would ask them is, you're going to force people to have remote ID on their drones. Can you tell me how many lives that would have saved if you'd implemented that 5 years ago?
Yeah, the interesting thing as well is, I think it's simpler than that as well, Bruce, which is really worrying. It's like, do you know how many people are killed every year on the road, right? Do you know how many people are killed every year in an aircraft? And then do you know how many people are killed every year via drone, right? So it's not about, let's just dispense with it. It doesn't appear to be about managing the risk, right? It appears to be about managing concerns that people have. And then you've factor in budgets and power and control, and then you have different personalities coming into and out of offices pushing different solutions. I'm not certain that all of them are just solving problems, or all of them are able to receive input from companies and others around the world and perhaps to persuade them one way or another. But the reality is, it's not about the risk today that's driving these solutions. It's about concerns that people have, and it's usually concerns that aren't based on genuine research and genuine facts. I mean, it's one of the reasons, actually, we're a big supporter of some of the future flight programs here in the UK, because it actually says, okay, fine, go out, do stuff, collect evidence, come back, and we'll look at it. You know, the come back and we'll look at it piece hasn't yet happened here, right? Because all these future flight programs are going on. If they actually do look at it and go, it turns out sensors are pretty good. You have been able to operate all these drones and nothing's collided. The world hasn't ended, and no manned aircraft will put at risk. But the reality is, that's not how it works today. You know, you're always getting. I even think it was a couple of weeks ago, there was another story of a drone that had a near miss with a plane, and you just think, okay, we should probably shut the airspace now. I mean, it's a terrible thing if it's true, but the reality is, planes have near misses plenty of times throughout the day anyway. And, you know, those are just called, I forget what they're called now. It's like
air procs.
Air procs, there you go. They're just air proxies. We have a form, right? And we have a body of people that meet every so often to discuss them. We don't ban all the air traffic in the same way we haven't banned all the cars, because everyone, hundreds of thousands of people die every year on our roads. So again, I don't think it is about the risk, sadly, Bruce. I think it is more about the concerns that people have, and some of them are based on facts, and the majority of them seem to be based on things perhaps I don't understand.
That's what disappoints me most. That's what annoys me the most, is that they're using this safety and this risk thing as a justification for what they're doing, when in reality it's about money and it's about other things. So they're being totally disingenuous with the reasons for introducing these things. And one of the problems when you try and introduce a solution to because there will be a problem, we're going to have eventually enough drone traffic that we'll need to have managing that risk. But if you introduce or create standards and introduce them too soon, you run the risk that by the time the problem arises, your solution's already out of date. You should stagger your development so that you introduce the solution at the last possible moment, just before it's absolutely needed, because then it is going to have the longest life from that point forward. As you say, our children, our grandchildren will be using these systems later on. So we run the risk of jumping to conclusions like, we must all have transponders or whatever, when, as you say, maybe sensors are a better element of the whole situation. By running at it so quickly, we may implement a long-term solution like ADSB, which is not the best fit for moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation that we're in right now isn't really practical to move forwards with. I think the main reason for that is I think there probably is, quote unquote, and it's going to sound very nefarious, but I don't mean it in the tinfoil hat sense. There are nefarious or ulterior motives from regulators, but it probably isn't, we'd like to make a heap of money, right? It's probably, there are lots of other things that regulators have to deal with that are probably a symptom of having a bunch of air traffic that they can't really see properly most of the time. And actually, then the second thing, and this is a happy circumstance, I'm sure if you're a regulator, this must have come up in discussion, because it would have come up had I been a regulator. All of the new kids on the block come with billions in investment money, right? And if you're going to try and solve a problem and you have no budget and you don't want to burden a bunch of other people with it, who's going to pick up the bill? Well, it's probably going to be the people that want to do cool things that have never been done before, right? Hence why we're already being held up with standards that we have to have way, over and above other classifications of air traffic in certain areas. We're being asked to consider rules that aren't really thought through, and we're being asked to pay for it all as well. And actually, in many instances, we're having to do a whole heap of R&D, which you then share with governments for free. And not all of that is paid, or even some of that is even part paid. So, the reality is, I think UTM drones and this promise of automated transport is attracting tens of billions of dollars of investment. I mean, we've all seen the reverse mergers and SPAC deals going ahead. There's lots of money there to solve problems, right? And I think if you're a regulator, you're probably not thinking about how much money can I make. You are probably thinking about how many other problems have I got that all of that money can solve for me, and how can I make all of these new people pay for that? That's where I'd be questioning.
Money comes into it, though, because you look at it, the regulators are directed by the politicians, and the politicians are guided by the lobbyists who have the big wallets. I went back and looked at that Senate hearing over the revoking Section 336 because I'm doing a video, and I listened to what the Commercial Drone Alliance said about the airspace and having to clear it because times are changing and the hobbyists are going to be in the way and it's no place for them now. And I look at that and I see what's transpired since then, exactly what they wanted, they got, and they're getting, because they're, as you say, the people with the billion-dollar wallets. They're the ones that are dictating everything. So money is a really, really huge factor in what's happening in terms of regulation, reform, and planning for the future. And we don't have money as a hobby, so we're not really even at the table. We perform 85% of all the RPAS operations in the world, and we barely get one seat on a table of 30.
I think it just, what's more disappointing for me is there's sort of a lack, I suppose it's risk aversion. There's a lack of willingness to truly look for a modern digital sky that's going to last us 100 years, not 5-year thinking, not 10-year thinking, 100-year thinking, and say things are going to be different. 50 years time, all the general aviation aircraft will probably be electric and really sleek and lovely and efficient and all that sort of thing. Let's be thinking about that, Sky. There's probably going to be less airliners now with the current situation happening.
I mean, Gary, while you're future gazing, there are even commercial airlines today, big commercial airlines, that are already cheesed off of the current ANSP model, right? They're wondering why they have to use an ANSP simply because of its geography. One very large airline has mooted, well, why is it when I transit through London, I can't simply have my services delivered by other ANSP in a different country? Why not? So there's this push coming from commercial aviation as well to think about cost reduction, and that's driving things like automation. So without realizing it, commercial aviation is pushing quite heavily towards a UTM style system anyway. Remember, not unmanned, unified. But I think coming back to Bruce's point on the money, by the way, and also yours, Gary, to a certain extent, what is the regulator really going to recognize from that? If you 175,000 drone pilots, for example, in a country registered on our system today, charge more tenor, it's 1.75 million. That's not really going to recoup, a couple of years worth of R&D, is it? To be honest, it doesn't scale, because over time, if you actually believe that the thing that's going to take off, pardon the pun, is commercial automated drone transport at scale, then there aren't going to be enough pilots around at that point to actually recognize the revenue from. So that model doesn't really work for me. I don't think it's money. I think where you're getting politicians potentially swayed is big companies coming in and regenerating urban areas that previously had nobody in it, offering to employ 200-300 local people and being given lots of different flexibility as an exchange for that. I think that's a really interesting thing that we've actually seen that in a few areas around the world.
Well, here in New Zealand, there's pretty much proof of that, because when approached, the CAA in New Zealand said, we don't believe that drone registration is necessary, viable, or even a good idea. And so the politicians, when they asked CAA, they said that. So what the politicians then did is said, well, we want registration, so we're going to hand this on to a different department. The Ministry of Transport will make the rules, and the Ministry of Transport, basically directed by the politicians who were looking at the commercial value for themselves and everyone else, said, we're going to have drone registration. Even though the Civil Aviation Authority, the experts in this field, have said, no, it's not necessary, viable, or practical, politicians have decided for themselves, for whatever reasons, whether it's because they like the travel that they get from various large corporations or whatever, I don't know. They've said, no, we're going to have it, despite the fact we don't need it, despite the fact that the safety organization has said it's not a good thing. We're going to make you have it anyway. And if you won't say registration is good, we're going to give it to a department we've got more direct control over, and they will take care of it. So they're going to give us registration. I mean, that's how it works. The politicians ultimately sign the checks at the end of the day for the regulators.
It's end of the day, it's your fault, because you do vote on those politicians. So, Bruce, it is your fault to vote on those guys.
I didn't vote for them.
I don't care, but the majority of the Kiwis did. So,
but most people are stupid, Louis. You know that. I mean, almost half the population has a below average IQ in this country. Can you believe that?
Okay. Mathematics. An Excel sheet properly tuned can give you the result that you want, but end of the day, I really think that we will be running some kind of UTM in the future, and we are mixing drones, and in drones we have lots of categories that will be mandated to have any sort of conspicuity device on board, because it's not your 25 grams drone that would cause something, but Richard's example of the drones carrying 200 kilos, yeah, they're only drones on what we usually say because they have no one on board. But that's a completely different thing of what we are speaking, and those would be much easily put inside the general aviation rules than on a specific drones category, because most of I believe, and Richard, you can correct me, I believe the limit for be considered an aircraft is 25 kilos or something like that.
In the specific.
Yeah,
I think so.
So above 25 kilos, it can easily be put in general aviation rules. So that would leave us the problem more easily manageable for the under 25 kilos drones. And in there, sorry, Bruce, but we'll have to do with the very, come on, you know this better than I do, the amount of guys that go in a shop and buy a ready-to-fly commercial drone, and they take the drone out of the box in the street and put it in the air. Come on, that is dangerous.
I challenged it. I challenged that, Louis, because I look at how many in the USA. What are there? A million drones, right? And so some of those people have been doing that. There's not been any really property damage. There's been no loss of life. You say it's dangerous, but the facts contradict that. Yeah, sure, there's a possibility that a drone may bring down an airplane, but they're more likely to be brought down by birds, a pilot error, a whole lot of other stuff.
No, I'm not going for the hell coming down and all that kind of crazy stuff. The thing is, if you speak with the guys from the insurance companies these days, they'll tell you that the most issues they have is drones, and I'm speaking of those drones, the commercial drones that you can buy in the shop, getting smashed on car windshields. That's the most of their work these days. And I was speaking when I was doing my insurances for my private drones. I was speaking with the guys from the insurance company, and they told me, no, we have lots of issues with this specific type of drones because they smash into windows every other day. So the reports that there are no issues with drones are greatly exaggerated, because there are issues.
Yeah, but
that doesn't sound like a drone problem. That sounds like a pilot.
It's not a drone. It's a car problem.
It's a pilot problem. The problem is now, right, we have something called the A2 Certificate of Competency. I've got to do that because let's face it, right, the A2 CFC is just read some bump, answer a few questions online. There's no practical proof that someone can actually fly an aircraft. And this is considered a certificate of competency. I actually changed those words, and I can't say them here because they wouldn't be polite. And bearing in mind, I used to teach the A2 CFC to people. The A2 CFC is not a certificate of competency at all. I've heard the horror stories, like Louis. I know someone, they have their CA permission, they got undercut by an A2 CFC operator. This guy did this job. He had his aircraft, he was flying it around under the A2 CFC. It hit a tree and fell through an Audi car window screen. I've heard this story. Now, you know, the insurance wasn't correct or anything. The guy hadn't got proper insurance either. The guy who had the GVC got knocked back because it was too expensive, then got in to go and do the job correctly. And that company had learned, they got their hands burnt from going the cheap option. But the A2CFC, all you got to do is do that. It's not good.
But I think that analogy applies across every industry. You get a cheap painter and decorator in, they do a rubbish job. You get the expensive one in. It pays your money,
I think that comes back to your automated future, though, right? As well, you can't rely on everyone having this really nice, amazing bit of kit that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, or because some people can't afford it. Go on, Mark. Go ahead.
So I come from a model flying background, and I fly model helicopters. I'll tell you now, flying a model helicopter is not easy. I would almost challenge any drone flyer that's not from a model flying background to go and try one, and they will swear something chronic without GPS. You've got to have the gyro on the tail. When you crash them, you've got to rebuild it. You don't like crashing them because they cost a fortune to repair. No insurance company covers my helicopter when it smashes into the ground nose first, or it goes in and I've done something really stupid. You don't do stupid things when you fly them because you like them as they are, nice and shiny. But if you went and did the helicopter B test from the BMFA, and you set that as the flight test, if you adjusted that for even the GVC flight test, the amount of pilots that you would have flying, their skill level will be a lot better, because you have to learn to fly a helicopter. You have to learn orientation. You have to learn to be nice and smooth. Where drones today, they're just so forgiving.
Aren't you now talking about taking away privilege that some people have and making them do something different? Where it sounds like it's the GA conversation in reverse, right? Now you're saying, well, I'm a better drone pilot than all of you people, so therefore you should conform to my standard.
No, I just think the A2CFC just takes away the practical flight test. Under a certificate of competency. My point is, I do believe there should be some sort of flight test with the A2CFC.
But doesn't our drone model?
Can I butt in? But the thing is, we've identified the big problem. We've identified the big problem. Not all drones are created equally. And the big problem we face as a hobby is that we've been lumped in with the DJI Phantoms and Mavics, when a lot of the craft we fly, like freestyle drones and model aircraft, are nothing like those in terms of their flight capabilities, in terms of the level of skill required to operate them, and in terms of the general responsibility of the people operating them. For the regulators to lump us in with the guy that goes down to the high street and buys a Phantom 4 and wants to get pictures of A380s at the local airport is an insult to the hobby, because regulators have repeatedly said the hobby is responsible and so forth. Why have they lumped us in there? It smacks, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it smacks of this drive to get this 0 to 400 foot airspace cleared of all other participants other than the ones that are paying or are going to pay a lot of money.
Really, but we started by limiting to below 25 kilos. Now we are doing the distinction between model aircraft flying versus shop-bought automated drones. But end of the day, we have to get a bucket where we can put all these together.
We don't call automotive. We don't call all powered vehicles the same. You have different categories of powered vehicles. You have motorcycles and cars, off-road, on-road. They're all different. They're not all subject to exactly the same regulation in the way that we're looking at with the drones versus radio-controlled model aircraft and freestyle stuff and so forth.
End of the day, Bruce, doesn't matter if you're riding a bicycle, a motorcycle, a car, or a lorry. When the red sign says is red, you stop. That's common to everyone. So the rules for the usage of airspace must be the same as the rules for road going. There are basic rules that are simple, enforceable, and easy to comply to, like braking at the stop sign, and those would be applicable to all. If you want to know more, if you want to have more like conspicuity, then certain models would need to have the device that allows them to be seen and be see and be seen. Those are the distinctions that you go. Come on, you don't ask for seatbelts on the motorcycle, but you ask for seatbelts on cars and lorries. So it's all a matter of adjusting the regulations to the purpose of the vehicle. It doesn't make sense to have on a manually flown helicopter, RC helicopter, doesn't make sense, or not, but it doesn't make sense to have a conspicuity device.
Exactly. Yep, you're right.
But it makes sense to put it on a DJI Mini 2.
Yeah, but the regulators are not drawing the distinction between your helicopter and a DJI Mini 2. They're all RPAS. They're all covered by the same regulations.
There is a distinction because at least with the EASA rules, if the device has possibility of reporting telemetry and all that, and GPS positioning, there are distinctions between those kinds of vehicles. So we have to adjust the rules. The rules must be flexible, but some basic rules must exist.
Surely now that we're seeing,
I came from the same background as all of you for model flying. So, but I understand the constraint that we might not like it, but the alternative might be much worse than not having some basic rules.
But aren't we getting to the point where Amazon and Co. and DHL are saying, well, maybe those inner city deliveries aren't for us at the minute, that regulators might stand back a little bit and look, and remembering that aircraft that Richard's company might deal with will be completely autonomous and flying BVLOS. Pilot training don't matter a jot about that, because there ain't going to be no pilot. Because for those delivery businesses to work, and quite a few inspection business,
there will be pilots, but they will do.
They will disagree with you, Louis. I mean, imagine a 911 dispatch operator clicking on a map and sending a drone to go and have a look at what's going on. They're not a pilot. They're just going to pick up the phone and get on to the next respondent.
Yeah,
they're not a pilot.
Yeah, so someone's going to get a phone, going to put it in the box, put it in the drone, push a button and say drone X is loaded. So drone 497, that's loaded. You push the button, step back, aircraft takes off, and it's gone. And that person, well, all they'll have done is put the phone in the actual aircraft, load the payload. They'll never see it again. And it won't be them flying it, it'll do it itself, because Amazon won't want to pay someone to be sat anywhere, flying it manually.
Yeah,
they will, or 4G, they'll have the fleet.
Come on, Mark, it will be a container with lots of monitors and a guy pushing.
I don't think it will.
From vehicle to vehicle. It's going to be a central dispatch.
I think it will. I think it'll be one person, and they'll look after a fleet of 30 or 40 at a time. If they go down that route, but you basically have Richard's UTM, and you're going to have your aircraft and go, right, it's going to warehouse 10, and it's 10 kilometers away. It's loaded up with its payload. We press a button, we say it's acknowledged, it's loaded. Richard's UTM will then check the route, and it'll go, right, we're going. And then as it takes off and goes, and then should Richard's UTM say, actually, you need to make a course correction, there's another aircraft coming along, Richard's UTM will then divert or go up or over.
The altitude angel.
And Mark is right.
It's got to make the adjustment, and it'll do it.
The most successful drone delivery systems already in use and have been in use for many, many years work just this way, called cruise missiles. They deliver on spot every time. The recipients aren't always happy with the package, but that is the way it works. You just set it on its way and off it goes, and it's autonomous. It does its thing. And they seem to work pretty damn well based on the results of recent conflicts.
Yeah, and so GPS
depends on your perspective there, I think, actually. But
well, you can see, Bruce is technically right. We've seen it where it'll fly down that street. People film them flying down the street. They take a turn. They actually turn down that road, and it delivers what is required of it. But I do think it will be completely pilotless systems. And Altitude Angel will be one of those service providers. And I suppose there'll be a degree of integration, and you'll choose that degree of integration, because it might be a case of, with Altitude Angel, you go, it only looks after the flight. Someone's still got to push the button to launch the aircraft, and then Altitude Angel will take over after a certain point as it leaves the warehouse. Or it'll be push the button, tell Altitude Angel it's ready to go, and then Altitude Angel will check the route and then go, yes, you're clear, off we go. It depends how much integration there is there.
Wouldn't you like to
I
know?
have the business opportunity for you. You just subscribe to the API of Altitude Angel and you develop that application. See, Richard,
We can do a lot of this today with some of the technologies that we got, right? But you can't legally get airborne in those ways using the technologies that are available, and that's part of what Arrow, we're putting Arrow out there for, to try and help more people get access to that technology, so that you don't have to be a pilot to make use of a commercial vehicle. But that comes back to that central point. I wanted to just go back to conspicuity if I could for a minute, because I wanted to just try a quick thought exercise. We keep slipping back, right? We keep slipping back to now, and we apply everything we know about now to this future airspace. So here's a random idea, right? Let's say we have all got to solve this problem. In the future, there are going to be 7.5 billion autonomous things, right? Highly automated or autonomous things. And we want probably all of them to be visible to each other. How are we going to do that? Because that's
really hang on a minute, I'll put on my salesman's hat. 5G.
Oh, that's
no, actually, Gary is really close.
No, because I hate to say this, right? 5G is not the answer.
That's already been done. When you type on Google a search, it does a local search. So problem solved. Just hand over that problem to Google. Search for who's flying around me.
Yeah,
and that's why Google is doing drone delivery, to create a need for its UTM service that will be rolling out to a place near you soon.
So actually,
that's the ASTM standard. That's what Wing's doing. It's the ASTM standard.
So what's interesting is you would actually run out of mobile numbers if they tried that anyway.
No, hang on. I need to stop you going down a rabbit hole here, because the numbers I just gave you was the first number, 7.5 billion, is the population of Earth currently. And today there are just over 5 billion of us carry a cell phone. Right? So you already have a serial number and a tracker in your pocket, right? So we've done a pretty good job with the population of Earth, and now we're dealing with an infinitely smaller number of aircraft, and we're still screwing that up. So do you not think?
Let's not forget communication is a great success.
Here's the thing: we don't care about, and this sounds harsh, I don't care. You don't need to. Your system, Altitude Angel, will not care about the rest of the world. It only cares about the area it's in. So all mobile phones, yes, they do. We all have country codes.
Actually, sorry, I have to correct you. It does, because we need to know where everything is, and then also where we think everything is going to go, so that we can make sure that through the duration of your flight path, which could be infinite for all we know, is going to be clear. So we do actually need to look much further than where you are, Mark. Sorry,
but you wouldn't, because you wouldn't worry about, to be honest, don't take this the wrong way, Bruce. Really, honestly, don't care. Don't worry about this. Don't take it the wrong way. You wouldn't care about Bruce's delivery company going on where he is, because Bruce is the other side of the world to me.
Nobody would.
Right? Now I'm going from my warehouse to my warehouse in the UK. So my company is delivering to
why would I not care? Sorry, you need to substantiate that, because what if I'm a helicopter pilot and I need to make sure that I'm not going to smack into your drone?
Well, he can't. He's the other side of the world.
Yeah, but what about, we're talking now about craft that are going to fly for days or months, solar-powered craft flying up high, days or months, traveling around the Earth. You need to plan in advance where they're going to be, because they could be flying into your flight area, and you may, in a week's time when you decide to have a flight.
I'm not quite sure where you're going with that, Mark, because I think you're making a point about a system which is designed to be global, needing to concern itself with the flight path of an aircraft in, say, Venezuela. You're flying locally in Reading. That's not what a global system does. It partitions
butterfly effect.
But having a platform which works globally doesn't preclude the other. So it's a bit of a strange statement.
Well, what I was saying, Richard. So we're in the UK. Bruce is in New Zealand. So if I have my company and I'm delivering to my warehouses in the UK, what I'm saying is Bruce is delivering to his in New Zealand. He doesn't worry about those two things. So Altitude Angel could be around the world, yes, but that doesn't.
As an altitude angle in your mind, at the moment, in this weird situation, do we operate in Bruce's country, in New Zealand, and in the UK? Because if the answer is yes, then yes, we do care about Bruce's flights, but we don't care about deconflicting Bruce's New Zealand flights with his
exactly.
Flights, right?
That's kind of my point. Yes.
Okay.
Well, maybe you should. You don't know what I'm flying.
Yeah, I've seen him. He actually built a cruise missile, so maybe we should be concerned.
Yes.
People probably don't know that story, but he did.
I won't be able to fly it till I've got my remote ID fitted, though.
Yeah, you need to deconflict that cruise missile.
Because all good terrorists have remote ID.
So here's the thing: do you think remote ID would have solved Gatwick?
No, but then again, would a license plate stop someone speeding through a red light? No. Would it stop 39,000 road traffic collisions every year? No, but we still have them. But that's by the way, I think that's a bit of a naughty argument to make, right? Because license plates weren't ever invented to stop bad things happening, right? License plates are a great way to work out who owns something that's just done something very bad, right? That's what that's for. Which is why I think drone license plates, again, unless they're electronically interrogable, then again, you're waiting for someone to have landed on a runway or done something very bad before you can scuttle over and go and peel off the little 6-digit number that you stuck to it. No, I don't think that's
so should we build fences at the top of cliffs or put ambulances at the bottom?
This is true.
That's
you speak universal
truth. That's his best-selling book, isn't it? That's the title of his best-selling book. I can see it now already. That's a brilliant. The Simpson autobiography. Should we build fences at the top or ambulances at the bottom? That's the life story. Yeah, no, look, DJI's just got a patent for a drone. Well, they haven't. They've had a patent for years for a drone in a box. Those are coming, and there's and I can't remember. Anthony, I think, said don't think there'll be a button pusher, and I agree, Anthony. I think those boxes will be connected to weather stations. And they'll go, well, is the weather nice enough today for my inspection? Yeah, it is quite nice for my inspection. I shall take myself off for a flight to do my inspection. And then
patent violation.
Oh, yeah, there we are, drone in a box, yes. And then before it does, it'll say, oi, Rich, it's okay to go flying? Yeah, it's all right, off you go then. And then it'll do its inspection, it'll come put itself back in this box and it'll charge itself up again. And then it'll be raining and windy for 2 weeks and it'll sit there going, I better just watch Bruce's OnlyFans channel while I'm waiting here in my box. And then when the weather's right, I shall take myself off again for another inspection.
Was it Skydio or some other manufacturer showed just exactly this thing happening in a video recently where it lands in a little thing and it gets covered up and then it comes out and flies and does inspections on a periodic basis?
Yeah, there's loads of them. There's been loads of dear old DHL. Bring it all the way back around to DHL. Had a really good one in Germany, I think.
That's the next rage about the drones and industrial drones is the drones in a box.
Yeah,
and it's not
drones in a box is a fantastic concept, right? But you get what I don't understand is there's this huge race in the technical industry as far as drones are concerned today to try and patent everything. I mean, as far as I'm aware, last time I checked, certainly how patents work in this country, a patent has to have something called inventive step, i.e. it can't be something that a person skilled in the industry might just logically conclude is the next best thing. So, for example, taking an idea and evolving it, that's not patentable. Coming up with a funky, cool mechanism that no one else has got to solve that particular problem.
Novel, I think, is the term they use.
Novel, yeah, exactly. It has to be novel. Again, it talks about novelty and inventive step. But again, you simply can't take a process. For instance, you get this a lot in software. You get someone who goes, "Oh, what do you do over there? Oh, that's a really good process. Let me just write some software to do that process for you, and then we'll patent that." That's not a patent, but you see, certainly, unfortunately, out in the US, you get a lot of these nonsense. And I certainly think, in the next couple of years in this drone industry, are going to see untold cases of patent trolls because it's the next best thing. So I don't know. By the way, full disclaimer, I don't know what DJI's drone in a box patent is all about, and I'm sure it's got inventive step and it's novel and everything else. But I'm sure there will be patents also that are trying to patent the idea of putting a drone in a box and making it automated, and that should just be banned as far as it's terrible.
I can tell you that I'm pretty sure that there will be quite a few prior arts to that, because they must have
doesn't
put
seem to work.
something-
No, actually,
doesn't
well,
it?
to be fair to Louis, and this is the worrying part, prior art isn't necessarily something which comes up a lot of the time, right? So if you've got really good patent attorneys and you're speaking to a person in the patent office who doesn't really understand the domain, then unless your patent happens to conflict with some keyword searches that they've done, you're probably not going to declare all the prior art, right? And then you're just going to hope that it gets through it, and then you're going to have to try, then you've got a patent, and then all the other companies have got to try and take it away from you. And if you happen to be a multi-billion-dollar corporation, who's going to be able to take that off of you? So, I mean, the patent system globally is just a farce anyway.
It's just a license to sue. It's a license to sue, but it's in the battle of the wallets.
Well, if you're China, you just ignore it anyway.
Well, most of aviation, if you have a look at things that are being invented for urban air mobility and all these other things, just look back to 1910, 1912, 1914. Have a look at the stuff that's kicking about. Most of these ideas are there on bits of paper in various forms.
Yeah. The Hyperloop is the only really new invention of our era.
Yeah, absolutely. It blows my mind, the whole patent thing, and it must be very frightening for some companies that have to fend off that sort of thing. So where are we going to take this? How are we going to wake Ian up? What can we do to make Ian say something? He's staying very firmly on the fence and not even listening now. He's actually doing something else.
He's
probably
watching.
What should we
Thing.
say?
He's
actually on a different. He's on a different podcast right now.
Oh, that's what
Probably,
it is.
Yeah,
yeah.
he's on his Real Friends show right now.
He's watching my OnlyFans channel. I can see it on the.
Can you see it bouncing off his forehead? If I pointed him, do you think you'll even notice? No.
I don't mind that he ignores
He's
the
watching
image, but
YouTube.
turning the sound off, that's terrible.
Yes.
That's not Ian. That's actually just an approximation of Ian, and he's just permanently shot.
It's
think
the
Ian is
autopilot from
always-
airline.
Ian is always an approximation
Is
of
it
Ian. I think.
recording? Is he got a recording of himself in a loop? Is that what he's doing?
I think that's it. A few minutes ago, the recording was stopped.
We should be doing some sort of voiceover on this now, isn't it? I'm just going to buy this.
No,
I'm going
a
to buy
few moments ago,
that.
the recording stopped and he didn't even blink for 5 minutes. So
It's the Madame Tussauds version of Ian.
And you can, and let's look at Wales internet yet again. Look how good Wales internet is yet again.
All right.
Working all together last night, huh? Welcome to the show, Ian.
Have you lot finished whinging about UTMs yet? I just want to say I'm fully on board. I don't care about having to pay as long as I get a benefit out of it. I think it's all a lot of nonsense
here.
for no good
That's
reason.
Bruce's
Bruce is just
only
trying to do
fans
civil
channel.
civil disobedience for the sake of it. That's just the reason, Bruce. I think it's all a load of nonsense.
Look, I was a hippie in the 70s, mate. I've got to keep up keep things going here. Keep the inertia.
I mean,
He was the hippie in New Zealand in the 70s.
Yeah, he was the only one.
The hippie, yes.
What do I do with all these paisley shirts now?
So, who've you upset this week, Ian? Mark. Ian must have upset someone this week, or have we managed to have a week of not upsetting anyone?
No upsetting
upsets.
people. No, I've been trying not to upset people now forever. No, this week it's all been quiet.
I like those new box goggle things I'm seeing. I'm glad those have come back into fashion.
Yeah, that's the start of it's been quite a busy week on hardware. You're starting to see, I think, some stuff happen. We've had 2 or 3 things start happening in the last couple of weeks, whether that's as a result of companies being able to scratch together enough components to actually make a product and put it on the shelf. I don't know, but you've got Fat Shark putting out their first Shark Bite product. You've got the manufacturer the chip supplier behind that getting really active this week. And it's quite interesting. Something has changed in that relationship. Whereas, because what you really had was the Shark Bite system was based off DiviMath technology and their chipset, and DiviMath really were taking a back step, whereas now they're really stepping forward in themselves. We've had the news today that the new FR Sky radio is also going to use their chipset, and they're going to be dealing with a lot more stuff themselves as well. I think we're probably going to get a launch from DJI in the next month. I think there's a real possibility. I just think it's heading for that time again. You know, we're now August. If they usually September time, and then you'll get something else maybe a bit later. So I think you could start to see more products come. I think, you know, there's some no-brainer stuff. There's going to be an Osmo Action 2. That's inevitable. It's like saying there's going to be a GoPro. What number are we on now, Bruce? I've lost track.
9, isn't it?
9, yeah. It's like saying there's going to be a GoPro 10. It's not exactly crystal ball territory, is it? So there's going to be an Osmo Action 2. I think you're probably going to see another handheld little camera from them, the Osmo Pocket 3. And then we're into the drone territory. And will we actually see a Mavic 3? I think probably. I'm just not convinced this year. I think the next product.
Do you want the Mavic 3, Ian?
That's all I wanted, Louis. It's just that
just to add another number.
It's inevitable. You know. Why stop there? I think it's this. I think this the hardware will start kicking in, and you're just seeing a lot of stuff happening right now as well. You know.
Are you saying that they're going after the Crash-O-Matic style drones? So the fully autonomous drones that are also have the Crash-O-Matic?
They've had a lot of time to do that. You know, if you think the Skydio now has been out over 12 months, it's a year now, I think, isn't it, Gary? Since
yeah.
And they'd have known about that. Yeah, and they saw that technology in the version 1. So they've had a lot of time to play with this in the background. So they could come with something very close. I'm just not sure they see it as a priority. DJI is a data-driven company, and they provide products based on that data. And I'm just not convinced the market wants that product. Don't get me wrong. I think Skydio have made a great product. But Steve Jobs said something really interesting. There's a great speech that a developer stood up when Steve Jobs first came back to Apple many years ago. A developer stood up and literally tried to rip him apart on stage and said, Steve came in and cancelled a load of stuff, and they cancelled this thing called Open Docs, and it caused loads of hoo-ha on the developers. And this developer stood up and said, who are you to do this? Why do you think you should do this? And Steve came out with this really good reply, which was, you can either have the engineers develop technology and then try to figure out where you sell it, or you can design something based on solving a problem and then get the engineers to solve that problem. And I think the Skydio has sort of come from the technology side rather than the use case side. And don't get me wrong, I think they have found a hole for it, but let's be realistic. How many S2s are you seeing, even in the country they're made in, on social media, on Facebook, on the videos? They're close to non-existent. So DJI will sell what they feel the market wants. And for the last 2 years, that's been Mavic Minis. And they haven't done too bad from it. Let's be realistic. Everyone's been buying sub 250 gram drones. And if you ask anyone what they'd buy today, most people would say a sub 250. If you want to buy a camera drone, why would you want anything bigger? So it's interesting. I don't know. I think we will start to see some tech move. You're going to start.
People like the shiny thing. Come on. People were all excited with the Mini 2 until they put out the Air 2S. Now everybody's, the Air 2S is so much better. And they forget about the basics, that it is heavy compared to the Mini 2. Yeah.
So I actually did a job today, right in a flight restriction zone. I couldn't take off because I was in the runway protection zone. Had all my permissions in place before someone has kittens. And I had the Mini with me, and I had my Phantom 4 Pro. So what I had to do was I literally had to walk to the edge of the runway protection zone, took off, take the shots. Now I'm a good 200 meters away from the subject, and I take my photos, and I get a nice big pano built and everything. I get home, and I've got the Mini with its zoom, and I've got the Phantom 4 Pro. When you get home and you look on the computer, the Phantom 4 Pro just destroys And I mean, it literally destroys the imagery, even with the zoom on the Mini 2. And you're just going, you know, even when I do inspections now, the Mini is just too weak. It's great for the hobbyists, yes, and it takes nice little photos. But when you want to get into inspection, you just cannot beat that 1-inch sensor on that front and forward Pro. It is just so good.
That's a given. That's one of the mistakes I believe that the Skydio drone has.
Yeah.
Is the cell phone style camera.
It was never good enough, was it? Now, you know, the thing to understand with DJI, they are the biggest company in the drone industry, period. And they've released close to nothing more than toy project releases for 2 years. You know, the Mini 2 is the intern project. Let's be realistic. There's nothing in there. There's nothing new in the Mini 2. It's just smaller. All you do is put a team of PCB boys by your designers on it just to say, take this, what we've already got, which we made 3 years ago, and shrink it. There's no, yes, that task in itself isn't that easy, but it's nothing really advanced from a software point of view. They could have literally gone back 2 years and pulled down that firmware off a Mavic Pro and shoved it on the drone, because that is in essence what it is. So all of those people are doing something. What are all of their engineers? These people who made this, the Inspire 2, the stuff that really pushed them on the cutting edge. So they're there. So something's going to come. And I have a feeling it'll be more than one. I have a feeling what they'll just have like a few big launches in a very short period of time. But they won't do it until they feel the market is ready to spend money. And I think we're getting there. The world's getting back to normal. The UK is back to normal right now. You go anywhere in the UK, for the most part, everyone's out and about. Everyone's doing everything they've ever done before.
And there's more people at home. I can say I was out today, like I say, and there's more people, you know, in the UK out and about than I've ever seen. It's absolutely crazy. But then people staycationing as well. So, you know, there's not as many people going on holidays abroad. A lot of them are staycationing, and you can tell. You can tell it's just absolutely crazy.
We had some recent tourists from over there actually, and they've come back, I think, this week, or they've gone back to Ireland. I don't think they're allowed back into the country, and they were told to squawk 1916 when they left South African airspace and the British Airways aircraft that took them to Ireland. No rugby fans there, are there? Anyway.
It just went.
yeah. I tried. It was subtle and it didn't work. It's so subtle, it just didn't work. Yeah, no, DJI no doubt will bring stuff out. I was trying to think. There was a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. We've been going a long time. I've completely forgotten what they were now, but there we are. Yeah, again, we've managed to have a pop at Richard. Was there any more for any more? I know one thing I want to ask Richard. What's this L airspace nonsense?
The what airspace? Sorry,
L class L that people are beginning to the chatterati are beginning to talk about.
It's just another wonderful way of solving a problem, right?
I don't know. I don't necessarily know quite where this idea's really come from. I can't believe that people are thinking there'll be a lower airspace, class L low airspace.
And other than its regulations already talk about different, proposed new different classifications of airspace, and it is possible for a state to adopt that regulation and implement it, but no one's done that today. I'm not sure who's going to scramble to go do that, but again, it's just another form.
The UK is talking about it.
It is. It's talking about a lot, right? But you have to remember there aren't that many people in the UK in the regulations team focused on doing cool future stuff. And secondarily, you go back to the same problem. What is it that they're trying to actually solve, and where are they going to get the money to do that? And I just don't think anything at scale is really going to happen here or anywhere else for a while with the existing regulatory instruments that exist. And again, if not, it's just going to be more of the same, right? I mean, I was just looking through some of the chat comments, and people were saying, the problem with, actually, it was John Birkeland who said, problem with data-driven is that you mostly get iterations of old products. Well, the problem is if you've only got the same tools in your toolbox, then you only get the same shapes, objects coming out of it at the end. And again, you've got the same issue here from a regulations perspective, right? We're just going back to the toolbox and rehashing and repeating and changing the names for certain things, but we're not solving for the fundamental problem, which is in 30 years' time, there are going to be way more unmanned aircraft than there are manned. And we might be needing to solve problems like, well, is it always appropriate for an unmanned aircraft to yield to a manned one? Is that the case? Like we know today, everyone or most people will just scoff at that very notion, but you start to have sensible conversations with people and say, well, what happens if the drone is carrying a human organ for transplant? And you're on a recreational flight looking around, taking photos of, the Tower of London or whatever it is, but there's a person over there dying unless they get their heart. So at what point should we start considering information about priority, etc., etc.? So,
I'm often heard to shout, "Get out of my way!" when aircraft come near, but they don't listen.
Yeah, no, we're at the point. Oh, I mean, and that tipping point will be accelerated by the moment people are making more money with their unmanned systems, surveying or whatever it is they're doing. Then when those companies get big, the survey companies, they'll be shouting at regulators to change right away, things like that.
I think that's the interesting thing, though. I mean, most industrial and commercial use of drones today, and I'm sure there are people on the school who do other things with drones. I get that, but the predominant factor is we are using flying cameras, right? That's ultimately what is driving the market. Now that isn't going to be the case forever, and there are lots of companies thinking about different things to use drones for. But lots of people still treat them as flying tripods, right? That's pretty much what they are. Okay, you can change out an optical sensor for something with a LiDAR or something fantastic, but it's still ultimately just giving you as an individual, a different perspective than you had access to before. And that's why I think, if we approach a lot of the airspace management as if it is still one person based or one person centric, you're on board or you're on the ground staring at an aircraft, we're doing ourselves a massive disservice, because drones have that power to significantly transform our lives and businesses, right? But not if they're regulated as a person with a camera flying around. And that's, to me, that's still the core of a lot of the challenge today, is that's the basis through which people project forwards. And I think it's going to be more of that. And the reality is that probably will never go away, because there'll always be some very skilled work that only certain people can do with drones. But the reality is it's not going to be the norm going forwards. In 30 years' time, it'll be very, very different.
I think you're right, Richard. It just has to be regulated as an unmanned aircraft. It doesn't matter what the hell it's got in it. It doesn't matter what it's carrying as such, or its payload as such. It's just another aircraft in the air. I think you're right.
And on that bombshell,
don't encourage him, Mark. Don't encourage him.
Don't encourage him.
I don't think that's ever happened. Did you just agree with me?
Well, I agree with most of it. You know what I mean? I agree.
we won't let it happen again. We won't let it happen.
No, it's not even
here to agree.
Well.
Consensus is a word that's forbidden.
It's always interesting when you've got someone like Richard who's got the system, and you get a chance to ask the questions. Well, why not this, this, and this? And it's very interesting to see the answers, of where they see it's going. Who else comes on here and is willing to put with us?
None of them are there.
To be honest, I wish more companies that purport to have a UTM, big or small, would engage more with other people, because the reality is, I think very quickly other people would recognise that it's not a UTM. They're not thinking
fleet management
50 years from now. You've got a remote piloting solution, mate. That's great. Jog on. Or you have an app. That's great. That's nice. That's like 80% of the market dismissed straight away. But then again, the others that probably don't engage so much are probably thinking about business models which are probably not friendly to a lot of existing airspace users, some of them even manned as well. I think that's probably why you don't hear from so many of them. What I would say as well is, I try and say this as much as I can, but we used to do lots of trade shows, and obviously pandemic fell apart and all of that stopped, and hopefully it's coming back soon. But we always used to say to folks, if you have a question, write to us. We respond to every single question that we get. We are very fastidious about it. We get some really stupid questions, and we respond to them. But
you prove that here.
You've been writing to him, Gary. Stop emailing him. Stop annoying him.
Yeah, case in point, right?
Now we're going to be getting the guy from D-Drone on again. He's fantastic.
I'm shocked that there is.
Next
Go on,
time
mate.
Richard's on, I want him to explain how counter UAS will fit into his UTM. That's something we need to talk about in future. Not now, because he's
I
already
don't think I've
spoken
been
way
part
too
of that
much.
conversation with the D-drone people that you're referring to. But I mean, counter UAS, that is the other half of the coin, right? But there's counter UAS detect and counter UAS shoot things down. And shoot things down is someone else's domain. That's not what we're at all interested in. But the reality is, I keep saying this to anybody who has a counter UAS solution today. Fast forward 5 years from now, and there are more flying things. Which one do you shoot down? Which one do you worry about? And the reality is, most people are investing, in some instances, tens of millions of pounds annually buying and servicing drone detection systems, which are only good for one thing, which is showing you that there's a drone in the sky. And actually, that's not why you buy them, right? Because you can see the drone in the sky with your eyes. What you want is to know, should you worry about that drone? And almost no counter UAS solution can do that. Or in fact, I don't think there is a single counter UAS solution to do that without a UTM, right? Because actually, the UTM knows about all the people who actually care,
so given
who are actually doing the right thing legitimately in certain zones.
So given that so many airports have spent so many millions of dollars on counter UAS systems, shouldn't you be pitching Altitude Angel as a counter UAS system and filling up the bank coffers with all their money?
He's already got it on his
I don't even know where to start with that, Bruce.
So Bruce, in the UK,
I'm just going to build my own one while we're here. You keep chatting, and I'm going to make a counter UAS system.
Someone's got a budget.
No, I've got some wires, and I've got a box. I'm just going to chuck them in the box. Here we are. Right. I've got an antenna. There we are. Very good. And somewhere, here it is. I've got the most important bit. Hang on.
I like Louis' one, actually. Louis is adaptable.
Louis also built one. Yeah, I've got a guarded switch. If you don't have a guarded switch, then it's not.
I just use my fingers. That's how I counter UAS. One UAS, two UAS.
That's the kill switch, that is. There we are. And there we are. That'll be $1 million, please. And it runs on a Raspberry Pi, like most of them.
The only one that's working.
Sorry, guys.
No, Mark. Sorry, mine is the only one that is working. See, I have it pointed at Bruce, and he's not flying any drone.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Just like that.
So we have this great app in the UK, and it's called Drone Assist. And funny enough, it's powered by Altitude Angel, and every airfield on it has this great comment. And I hope you don't mind this, Richard, but it goes UTM connectivity. And it goes, we can't submit a digital flight request at this facility yet. And it's all powered by Altitude Angel. But he's definitely on the case for all the airfields.
Their counter UAS system is called Drone Desist.
Yes.
Drone Desist. Our push there, by the way, is to hopefully make it easier for people who want to fly commercially in and around airports to go and do that with a click. And the reality is the vast majority of people can't do that today unless you're prepared to get on the blower, and that's a phone, by the way, to people who are in other countries in the UK. Make a phone call, talk to some people. Maybe you can find a form online that you can fill out, and it will email someone and pop out a PDF somewhere, and in a couple of days you'll get a response. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just electronic fax, isn't it? And the reality is the button is there because as a global company, you could click on any facility, and whether it's our UTM in the background giving that permission or it's someone else's, we should have a facility to make it easy for you to go fly there, right? I mean, that's always been our first mission, is to open up the airspace to more people and to do so safely. And that's the reason that we currently put that message on a lot of airports. I will challenge you this, actually. It's not every airport. It certainly isn't every airport in the UK.
It's not quite every single one, though.
And it is a reducing number, I will tell you that too. But certainly across Europe, there are lots of facilities that are connected to us and use us to try and automate some of that decision making, so that you can get a one-tap response. It's kind of, I'd say it's Lance-like, but the reality is it's actually better. But
I've just realised as well, you've changed it again, because it didn't used to show me this, but it's now showing me that ATC number. It wasn't at one point, and now it is again. It's now showing me that again.
Again, our job is to make it easy for people to access the airspace. And if you bury the phone number of ATC, which you need to call somewhere in the middle of the AIPs, which is a document that the vast majority of people don't understand, but is public, then we can certainly help you out by giving you that number, right? Because if that's the approved mechanism for you to go get permission to fly, then it's our job to make it as easy as possible for you to phone the right people. And I wished it wasn't a phone call, but unfortunately, that is the policy.
I like speaking to someone, because when you speak to them, some of them you fill in the form and they go, and you fill in the form and you send it off. You still have to speak to someone. Yeah. It's still going to be a load of emails, even once you've submitted a form. But I quite like it. We just ring them up, and some of the best ones to deal with are the ones you just phone them up. It'd be like giving them a radio call, I suppose, if you're a manned aviation. You just phone them up, you go, yeah, I'd like to do a drone flight. And they go, where are you? You give them the location, and they go, yeah, no problem. How long are you going to be? I'll be about 15 minutes. Can you call us when you're finished? Yes, I will. What's your number? And they take your number, and if there's a problem, they'll phone you. I mean, I always say to them, if you phone me, I won't answer the phone because I'm flying, but I'll be out the sky. Literally, I will get out the sky. So just if my phone rings, I'm just going to land. And that's what I do with ATCs, and it works. I do like a phone call with them.
And how much, Richard, would an app like this wouldn't be Drone Assist if we don't live in the UK? Perhaps it would be Guardian Angel. How much would it cost me to have all the local aeronautical information in my pocket?
Pick a currency, and the value is 0. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. And actually, thank you for the shout out, Mark. I really appreciate the Drone Assist shout out. But we also have Guardian, which is our global version of that same app. It's free. And actually, here's a little sneaky exclusive for you. This year, they're getting a major series of upgrades all around the world. We've got some brand new apps.
If I wanted to then report a flight, I could, in the Guardian Angel, I could just say, hey, I'm flying now, which I've done in Tanzania, at the DHL delivery thing. But anyway, that's another thing altogether. He's asleep again. And then if I was flying using Mission Planner and the ArduPilot ecosystem, it would actually start, and I was connected to the internet, blah, blah, blah. But that would also report to your UTM as well, wouldn't it? If you've set it up.
It doesn't report just to us, by the way. It reports to anyone that looks. So if you happen to be in the vicinity of one of Gary's DHL delivery flights in Tanzania, then you'll also see that. So other Mission Planner users, in fact, there are now 70-odd apps, I think, connected to us that report information and receive it as well. So it helps. The more people that can join, the better. But the reality is, we don't monetize that information. It's there for safety purposes, and again, it's all free, so you can go ahead and use that.
I've always wanted to be on an infomercial.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Ring now.
Set it up. So Mark set it
free
up.
set of steak knives with every app.
While I've still got Drone Assist up, then. So this is a question for Richard. So what can you just tell people? So this is for UK. I'm sorry. So if you're in America or anywhere else,
there's only like 3 of us watching from the UK right now, Mark.
Yeah.
Oh right. Damn it! When you press Create a Flight Report, it's that 500-meter circle which drives me up the wall. By the way, because you can't draw the area that you want to fly in, regardless. Even if I'm going to move point, it still gives you the circle. Where does that information go to? Apart from
cloud,
where does it? What happens to it? To the cloud?
Along with the drone.
Along with the drone.
What about a fine day when there's no cloud?
Does it report to anything else? Is what I'm asking. Does it tell manned aviation? Does it tell?
Whoa! Back up a little bit, Mister. That would require some kind of ubiquitous system that connects to manned aviation as well as unmanned. So, yes, in the sense that all manned aviation is completely free to use our service as well to check their flights. And actually, I will just give a shout out to people like the National Police Air Service, the helicopter service on the helicopter charities for ambulances, etc. All of them will generally consult our service just to see if anyone's actually reported a flight in their vicinity. But it could be better, right? It could be that people, we have some way to broadcast that information. If you cast your minds back to Operation Zenith in 2018, what we did exactly was that. We took all these drone flights that were reported and we pushed them back out as ADS-B targets, so that if you had something that could receive ADS-B, you would see all of the drones that we knew about detected and cooperative. So ones that passed in the field of a drone detection system, as well as ones that were actually connected via an API effectively. All of those were lit up like a Christmas tree for manned aviation to see. So it's been done. And it's doable. But the reality is it's not doable at scale because technically you have to get all sorts of permissions. Well, not technically, you do have to get all sorts of permissions to do it. And the reality is there are bigger questions. If we can see 150,000 drones a month, which is, the kind of the UK average in a bad month for us, we don't really want to broadcast all of those out to everyone on ADSB. There's no filtering in the ADSB, right? So, it's not going to be a particularly useful situation.
So just to clear, Richard, you just said 100. So you're saying 150,000 people are logging a flight a month?
Not pressing a button. We will see about 150,000 flights on a typical month, just in the UK, coming in from all the different channels that we have. Yeah, and that's all voluntary. Right? No one's required to do it.
Yeah, and that's create a flight report basically on here.
No, it's one of the mechanisms. Create a flight report on there. You go to Drone Safety Map, file a flight plan. You can go via our APIs. We have partners, Drone Cloud, etc. People filing plans. So we aggregate all of that. So if anyone's familiar with an organization called Eurocontrol, it's a little bit like that, only modern and useful.
Just to confirm, then, everyone, because I've not seen anything in the news. So 150,000 flights a month. Just to confirm, everyone, no one's died in the UK from a drone so far this year. Can someone just confirm that?
It's only a matter of time.
Okay.
It's like when you go out and you say it hasn't rained yet, and then all of a sudden.
Hey, if I was asking about manned aviation, if you said to me something had happened this year, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. It's a shame of it, isn't it?
Why is the safety bar for a drone company, and I mean a hardware company, why is the safety bar not make it as safe as manned aviation or safer, as opposed to let's make it impossible?
That would involve making it more dangerous.
Right. Well, at the moment, yes, probably. Right. But that's the reality. Again, we hold drone companies and all these newcomers to such an incredibly high safety bar when actually there are lots and lots and lots of aviation deaths around the world, on an annual basis. And that's tragic, right? But it's accepted, which is strange because we don't accept it from something like a drone.
The first one that happens in the UK or in Europe or wherever, that person is going to get, the absolute book thrown at them. And that'll be the sad thing because, it's been now 21 years since CAP 722 reared its head. And it was come out in 2000, I believe.
I was on the comment process for that. I was asked about that. Has it really been 21 years? Goodness me.
You were still in short pants, Gary.
Yeah, I was. Very much.
So in 21 years, no multi-rotor, no commercial drone has to date in the UK killed anyone. So there's no statistics as such, sadly, to say, your chance of death by a drone is this, but manned aviation, it's 1 in 7 million, sadly. They've got a number for that. That's the bizarre thing.
And during that time, not one person has died anywhere in the world, but also during that time, over 1,000 people were hospitalized when a piece of space rock exploded over a city in Russia. Where are the risks?
There's a risk. And on that bombshell, because look, we've been going on for 2 hours now.
And it was a bombshell.
And it was. Dash cam footage and all. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Richard, thank you very much for answering honestly and putting up with us as ever. Dear viewer, wherever you are in the world, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves. We'll see you again 2100 GMT next week. Gentlemen, and even Ian, cheers. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, no, where's the mouse? There's the first button. And